Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive. Today, we're embarking on a journey back, way back actually, to a really pivotal, often sort of overlooked moment in ancient history, right after the Great Flood, when humanity was, well, getting a fresh start. And we're zeroing in on one figure whose ambition, as our sources reveal, didn't just shape his world, but arguably laid a crucial foundation for what came next. We're talking about Nimrod. Now we've got a fascinating stack of source materials here, primarily digging into Genesis 10, specifically verses 5 through 10. Our mission today, to really unpack who Nimrod was, figure out what that powerful title, a mighty hunter before the Lord, actually meant, and explore how his actions, his, vision, set the stage for patterns of human achievement and maybe human defiance that still echo today. Prepare for some genuine aha moments, I think.
Yeah, and what makes Nimrod so intriguing for a deep dive like this is how suddenly the narrative in Genesis just shifts focus. You have pages of genealogies, and then, bang, he gets this unique spotlight. We'll be connecting the dots between his very early kingdom building and these perennial themes of human pride, centralized power, and that complex relationship between human will and divine command. Themes that are, well, they're just as relevant now as they were thousands of years ago.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our sources kick off by meticulously detailing the descendants of Noah's sons. We move from Japheth's line to the sons of Ham, Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. And the text isn't just listing names, is it? It's carefully mapping out humanity into families, regions, even languages. It feels very orderly.
It is, absolutely. That initial genealogical structure in Genesis 10 is foundational. It emphasizes a world being, systematically reestablished after the flood, God's sovereign hand sort of guiding humanity into clans and nations, filling that command to be fruitful and multiply.
Yeah.
It paints a picture of ordered growth, dispersion across the earth.
Yeah.
But then right as the text continues with Cush's descendants in verse 7, there's this really dramatic, almost jarring narrative shift. It's like the spotlight, which was, panning across humanity, suddenly snaps into this intense focus on just one person.
And that beam lands squarely on Nimrod, verses 8 and 9. It's such a striking contrast to the lists we've just heard, a deliberate emphasis. What makes him stand out so much? Why break that pattern?
Well, the text tells us directly. It doesn't just list him, it describes him. And what a description. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. That's not just a passing comment. It's an immediate characterization setting him apart, signaling his importance. It really forces you to ask, why that description and why him?
A mighty hunter before the Lord. Okay, my first thought, and I imagine this is common, is that sounds like praise, right? Like he was incredibly skilled, maybe even divinely blessed, protecting early communities, establishing order in a wild world. But our sources hint this phrase is much deeper, more complex, maybe even darker.
Yeah.
What's really going on under the surface there?
You've nailed the core of the debate, and it's truly fascinating. That Hebrew phrase, Gibertei Lifnei Yahweh, it's just far more nuanced than a simple compliment. Let's break it down a bit. Gibber means mighty one. Hero often implies strength, prowess, even military might. So Nimrod was definitely formidable. A leader. Say it refers to hunting. That could indeed mean protecting people from beasts, a vital job back then. But the real kicker is Lifnei Yahweh, literally before the Lord. Now this can mean in the sight of God, suggesting divine recognition, maybe favor. Under that reading, Nimrod's a blessed leader, a protector, using his strength for good. And some scholars argue exactly that. He was a hero carving out safety.
Okay, that makes sense as one interpretation.
However, and this is where it gets really interesting, a significant amount of scholarship, which our sources point to, argues for a different read. Lifnei Yahweh can also imply in defiance of, in opposition to, or maybe in the face of the Lord. Think of it like asserting your own power in front of a higher authority, not necessarily in service to it. In that light, Nimrod's might not have been just for protection, but for building his own dominion, maybe even subjugating others. So he wouldn't be a God-blessed hero, but a powerful guy operating independently, asserting his own will, building his own rep in God's presence, but maybe apart from God's will.
Wow. Okay, that's a huge distinction. So it's not just a descriptor, it's a loaded phrase. There's potential tension there between his power and God's authority. He's not necessarily for the Lord, but maybe acting in the face of him. That totally reframes him. Not a simple hero, but someone way more complex, potentially rebellious in his ambition.
Precisely. That linguistic ambiguity is key because it sets us up to understand what he does next. It's not just about his hunting skills. It's a comment on the nature of his power and where he aimed it. Was he divinely appointed? Or a human leader consolidating power through his own strength and ambition? The text makes us ponder that.
And if we consider that potential duality that before the Lord could mean defiance, then his actions, they seem to offer some clarity, don't they? Because he doesn't stop at hunting. Our sources highlight him as the very first empire builder after the flood. That's a massive leap for humanity. How do we interpret this sudden surge of ambition in a world so recently, reset?
It's truly monumental. The text just pivots from scattered families to kingdom building. Nimrod isn't just a tribal chief. He's shown starting a profound shift in how humans organize themselves. Verse 10 says it explicitly. The first centers of his kingdom were Babylon, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh and Shinar. These aren't just villages. These are named cities, foundational urban centers in Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. This marks a deliberate move away from dispersed family groups toward centralized power, organized societies, unified rule. It speaks to incredible leadership, rallying people to build and settle in these new cities. And for anyone familiar with the ancient world, names like Babylon, Erech, Akkad, they immediately signal power, influence, culture.
Babylon. Yeah, that name alone immediately sets off alarm bells, especially knowing what's coming in Genesis 11 with the tower. So this isn't just about survival anymore or protection from animals. This is about consolidating human power, gathering people under one rule, establishing a very human-centric kingdom. It almost sounds like it's directly pushing back against that command for humanity to spread out and fill the earth.
It is a direct contrast. That's a crucial tension the text highlights. Remember, Genesis 9.1, God's command to Noah was clear. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Spread out. Nimrod, with his kingdom building, is doing the exact opposite. He's centralizing, gathering people into cities, and establishing this kingdom in Shinar. Now, Shinar isn't just a place in Mesopotamia for biblical readers. It becomes synonymous with human attempts at self-glorification, rebellion against God. It's the location, the focal point for humanity trying to organize itself, foreshadowing things like the Tower of Babel.
So we have this guy, Nimrod, with these ambiguous motivations, this mighty hunter before the Lord, who then actively gathers people, builds powerful cities, establishes a kingdom, and does it in a place that becomes symbolic of rebellion. He's actively resisting the command to disperse. It sounds like an early, grand-scale version of let's all huddle together for security, but maybe driven more by power and making a name for himself, separate from God's plan.
That's a great way to put it. It speaks to that fundamental human drive for security, yes, but also for consolidated power, collective identity. But in a way that, according to these sources, deviates from the divine blueprint. I mean, imagine the sheer organizational skill needed to gather people into cities after a global flood. It shows his unique leadership, for better or worse. He's not just surviving, he's actively shaping the post-flood world according to his vision, a vision focused on human structures and human power.
Okay, so if Nimrod is the architect of this kind of centralized, human-focused ambition, is she basically laying the groundwork for the Tower of Babel, which, as you said, is right around the corner in Genesis 11? Is this like a dress rehearsal for that big act of human pride?
Absolutely. I think that's a very fair assessment. Nimrod isn't just powerful, he's the prime mover, the ideological and geographical pioneer for exactly the kind of project Babel represents. Think about it. He establishes the place Shinar, the heart of his kingdom. He establishes the method city building, centralizing population and power. And crucially, he seems to establish the mindset, the pursuit of human glory, making a name for ourselves instead of honoring God's design. So when you get to Genesis 11.4 and the people say, let us build for ourselves a city and a tower so that we may make a name for ourselves, it doesn't come out of nowhere. It feels like the natural result of the trajectory Nimrod started. He didn't build the tower itself, but he arguably created the environment, political, geographical, ideological, that made it possible. He laid the cornerstone for a human-centric worldview, seeking identity and security in collective achievement rather than in relationship with the Creator.
That puts a fascinating spin on it. So this isn't just some isolated story about a strong guy. It's maybe the earliest, clearest example after the flood of human pride trying to build its own kingdom on earth, independent of, maybe even opposed to God's authority. Nimrod's kingdom becomes the prototype, the pre-Babel Babylon, symbolizing this recurring pattern.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where we connect Nimrod to the much bigger biblical story and maybe even beyond. He embodies this deep human tendency, doesn't he, to seek power, control, to make our own glory, our own name, instead of finding our place in God's larger plan. He's the first major figure post-flood who actively moves against that command to disperse and instead goes for centralized, human-centered dominion. And that sets a pattern we see again and again, empires challenging God right up to the symbolic Babylon in Revelation, representing that ultimate human rebellion. It's a foundational lesson, really, on the dangers of unchecked human ambition and that desire for self-exaltation.
Wow. What a deep dive that was into just a few verses. Nimrod's story, though brief, is clearly a crucial pivot point in the narrative. It really shows that even after a global reset, like the flood, that human inclination towards self-exaltation, towards centralized power, wanting glory for ourselves, it remains a constant challenge.
It's a powerful reminder for us today, isn't it, to maybe examine where our own ambitions lie. Are we building our own little kingdoms, focused on our power, our glory, or are we trying to align with something bigger, a more expansive purpose?
So, what does Nimrod's story, this ancient tale of a mighty hunter, the first city builder, teach you about that enduring human struggle with power, control, the temptation to build our own kingdoms apart from maybe a higher purpose? And how does that resonate in our world today, where ambition and centralization are still such powerful forces? Something to mull over until our next deep dive.